The air in a congressional hearing room has a specific weight. It is a mixture of old mahogany, pressurized air conditioning, and the palpable tension of men and women who know that every syllable they utter is being etched into the permanent architecture of American history. On this afternoon, the atmosphere didn't just feel heavy, it felt static. Senator John Kennedy, a man whose Southern drawl often masks a razor-sharp legal mind, leaned forward. He wasn't looking at his notes. He wasn't looking at the cameras. He was looking directly across the table at Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida, and now the woman holding the shield for the highest law enforcement office in the land. Kennedy didn't preamble. He didn't offer the usual "thank you for being here" or the polite procedural fluff that usually pads these televised duels. He reached into the very heart of a national trauma, a ghost that has haunted the American psyche since a humid August morning in 2019. He asked 6 words. Did Jeffrey Epstein hang himself or did somebody kill him? The room didn't just go quiet, it held its breath. In the world of high-stakes political theater, there is a theatrical pause, the kind practiced by trial lawyers to let a point sink in. But this was different. This was the actual stillness of an institutional vacuum. It was the silence of people realizing that a binary trap had been set. In that moment, the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just a tabloid headline or a late-night conspiracy theory. He was a legal reality sitting between two of the most powerful people in the room. This wasn't a question asked in a dive bar or on a fringe podcast. This was a United States Senator asking the representative of the Department of Justice under oath to confirm or deny a murder in federal custody. The anatomy of the question. To understand the gravity of these 6 words, we must look at the specific verb. Kennedy didn't ask if there were anomalies. He didn't ask about procedural failures. He used the word kill. In the language of the DOJ, kill is a word of finality. It implies an actor, a motive, and a catastrophic breach of the state's duty to protect its most valuable witness. By framing the question as a binary choice, suicide or homicide, Kennedy eliminated the gray zone where bureaucrats usually hide. The witness, Pam Bondi's discipline. Across the table, Pam Bondi sat with a composure that can only be described as institutional. She is a veteran of the courtroom, a woman who understands that, in a hearing, your posture is as much a part of the record as your words. Until that question, she had been managing the room with surgical precision. She used process language, that specialized dialect of Washington, D.C., where you speak for 10 minutes without actually saying anything. Her eyes had been fixed, her hands still, her breathing rhythmic. She was the personification of the Department of Justice, cold, organized, and impenetrable. But when those 6 words arrived, the mask flickered. Documentary analysis shows a micro-expression, a fraction of a second, where her eyes left Kennedy's. In the world of behavioral psychology, this is known as cognitive retrieval. She wasn't forming a spontaneous thought. She was reaching into her mental filing cabinet for the approved institutional response. Her hands, which had been resting flat like stones on the table, suddenly came together. A protective gesture, a bracing for impact. The institutional answer. Then she spoke. The answer wasn't a reflection. It was a restatement of a position. He hung himself in a cell in the Metropolitan Detention Center. Note the precision. She didn't say, "I believe." She didn't say, "the evidence shows." She stated it as a definitive historical fact, anchoring it to a specific location to give it the weight of a closed file. But in doing so, she stepped directly into the second part of Kennedy's trap. Kennedy didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply nodded, a slow rhythmic movement that suggested he wasn't satisfied, but he was finished with that particular bait. He wrote something down. In a hearing, when a senator writes something down in silence, it's not a note, it's a mark on a ledger. Creative analysis, the ghost in the room. What the cameras don't show is the shadow of 2019. When Bondi says he hung himself, she isn't just answering a senator. She is attempting to bury a body that refuses to stay underground. The economic and political stakes of the Epstein case are unlike any other in modern history. We aren't just talking about a sex trafficker. We are talking about a man who sat at the nexus of global finance, intelligence agencies, and the highest echelons of the billionaire class. If the answer was somebody killed him, the entire American legal system would collapse under the weight of its own complicity. The institutional position is not just a conclusion, it is a survival mechanism for the state. Bondi's answer was the only one she could give. But as Kennedy's pen scratched against the paper, the room knew that the official record and the truth were still miles apart. Senator John Kennedy is not a man who settles for a what. He is a man obsessed with the when. After Pam Bondi delivered the official institutional line that Jeffrey Epstein took his own life, Kennedy didn't blink. He didn't try to play coroner. He didn't pull out a medical textbook to argue about hyoid bone fractures or the physics of a ligature mark. He did something much more dangerous to a bureaucrat. He asked for the receipts. Are you going to release all the information about that? The question was a pivot. It moved the conversation from the event of the death to the documentation of the death. It was a demand for transparency in a building made of secrets. The language of the deep state. Bondi's response was a masterclass in what we call institutional deflection. She didn't say no. In Washington, you almost never say no. You say, we are working through it. We are working through it with the Department of Justice, she replied. To the casual observer, this sounds like progress. To a veteran of the Hill like Kennedy, it sounds like a dial tone. Working through it is a phrase designed to suggest activity without committing to an outcome. It is the linguistic equivalent of a hamster wheel, plenty of motion, zero displacement. Kennedy, sensing the stall, tightened the noose. When? A single word, a temporal demand, and here the documentary footage captures what Netflix editors would call the practical pause, the internal calculation. This wasn't a pause of dramatic tension, it was the safe commitment pause. Bondi wasn't thinking about the truth. She was performing an internal calculation. She was scanning the legal horizon to see what dates she could give that would satisfy the record today without creating a subpoena tomorrow. She looked down at her papers. She didn't read them, she just glanced at them reflexively, a physical tick of someone seeking the comfort of a prepared script. She knew that naming a date creates an obligation, saying nothing creates a problem, so she chose the third path, the fog. In the near future, she said, the Kennedy Razor Kennedy's retort has already become a classic piece of political Americana. Like, before I die, the room erupted, not into laughter, but into a strange, vibrating sound between a chuckle and a collective sigh of unease. It was the sound of a room recognizing a universal truth that near future in the Department of Justice can span decades. Kennedy is 73 years old. He has been in the Senate since 2017. He has been asking about Epstein since 2019. He has seen near futures come and go like seasons. He has watched investigations get described as ongoing, documents characterized as sensitive, and names hidden behind redaction marks that have more to do with protecting reputations than protecting national security. Creative analysis, the currency of time. In the world of high-level political documentary, we must analyze time as a weapon. Why does the DOJ withhold the Epstein files? The official reason is protecting victims. The cynical reason, and the one Kennedy was pressing, is attrition. If you delay the truth long enough, the protagonists die, the witnesses forget, the public's outrage is diverted by the next news cycle, the next economic crash, the next war. Accountability has an expiration date. By giving a near-future answer with no calendar attached, Bondi was effectively trying to run out the clock on a 73-year-old senator. The pattern of protected silence. Kennedy wrote something down again. This is his ledger of deferrals. He isn't just tracking the Epstein case, he is tracking a pattern of institutional management. He has seen this movie before. He saw it with the Hunter Biden laptop story, where the truth was managed until after an election. He saw it with the Strazok page text messages, where accountability was dissolved into a process. When Bondi says they are working on it in a way that doesn't put irrelevant information into public circulation, she is claiming the right to be the sole arbiter of what the American people need to know. But who defines irrelevant? In a death investigation involving the world's most prolific blackmailer, is a phone log irrelevant? Is a visitor list irrelevant? Is a flight manifest irrelevant? To the DOJ, irrelevant often means incriminating to the institution. To Kennedy, everything is relevant when the most high profile prisoner in American history vanishes from a locked cell. Transition to the facts. Kennedy's strategy now shifts. He has established that the witness won't give a date. He has established that the witness is hiding behind process. Now he decides to lay out the anomalies. He decides to read the ghost story into the record, piece by piece, starting from the very beginning. August 10th, 2019, Manhattan, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, a place where the cameras went dark at the exact moment history needed them most. Senator Kennedy doesn't argue with emotion. He argues with numbers and timelines. To understand why his question made the room hold its breath, we must look at the reality of the night of August 10th, 2019, a chain of incidents that, if viewed in isolation, might be seen as mere errors. But when combined, they form an impossible script. 1. The geographic confusion. In her testimony, Pam Bondi referred to the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC. Kennedy immediately noted this error. Jeffrey Epstein actually died at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, MCC, in Manhattan. This slip of the tongue by the nation's chief law enforcement officer is not just a verbal fluke. It reflects a systemic detachment from the ground level details of the case. 2. The Suicide Watch Protocol. Epstein had a prior incident in jail. He had been placed under strict suicide watch. Yet, by a clinical decision that was never fully explained in writing, he was removed from that protocol. In the world of a Netflix documentary, this is the inciting incident. The world's most significant prisoner, the man holding a list of names that could topple economic dynasties, was returned to a cell without direct supervision. 3. The silence of electronic witnesses. This is the most cinematic detail, the security cameras. That night, the cameras covering the area outside Epstein's cell were non-functional, not just one, but a system-wide failure. In the era of surveillance 4.0, where every citizen's footstep is recorded, darkness fell over the fortress of justice in the heart of New York precisely when it was needed most. 4. The most expensive naps in history. 2 guards were assigned to check on Epstein every 30 minutes, but they fell asleep. Not only did they sleep, they falsified the patrol logs to confirm that everything was fine. They admitted to falling asleep. They admitted to falsifying records, and the judicial apparatus accepts this as a personal mistake rather than part of a larger orchestration. Script analysis. Creative analysis, probability, or script. If we use mathematics to calculate the probability of camera failure plus guards, sleeping plus falsified records, plus a prisoner removed from suicide watch, all occurring within the same few-hour window, the number is nearly 0. This is the hidden power mechanism Kennedy is targeting. Power does not necessarily require an assassin with a knife. Power is sometimes simply the ability to create a vacuum, a void where rules are suspended, where devices stop working, and where a man can vanish without leaving a witness. 5. The war of forensic experts. Bondi relies on the official report, suicide by hanging. But Kennedy recalls a different reality. Dr. Michael Baden, a world-renowned private forensic pathologist hired by the Epstein family, reached the opposite conclusion. Baden pointed to specific fractures in the neck, specifically the hyoid bone. According to medical literature, these fractures appear in cases of homicide by strangulation far more frequently than in suicidal hangings. When Kennedy poses his question, he isn't just confronting Bondi. He is placing 2 forensic reports on the scales. On one side, the institutional position, and on the other, the physical evidence. Transition. The silence of the files. Kennedy writes one more line in his notebook. He doesn't need to prove Epstein was murdered. He only needs to prove that the current record is incomplete. He looks at Bondi. He knows she holds the key to the archives, and he knows that her near future is, in reality, a stone wall. To the untrained eye, Senator Kennedy's questioning seems like a series of random grievances, but in the world of high stakes litigation, the kind Netflix loves to deconstruct in slow motion, this is the foundation phase. Kennedy doesn't start with the mystery of the jail cell. He starts with the pattern of protected misconduct. He understands that if he can prove the Department of Justice has a habit of hiding names and managing truths, then the Epstein case isn't an anomaly. It's the logical conclusion of a system designed to protect its own. 1. The Strzok and Page precedent. Before he reaches Epstein, Kennedy walks Pam Bondi through the ruins of the 2016 election investigations. He brings up Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, the FBI agents whose text messages became the spark for a political wildfire. Kennedy's technique is binary sequencing. He asks questions that only have two exits, yes or no. Did the inspector general find they hated Trump and wanted Clinton to win? That's correct, Bondi admits. He establishes the bias, he establishes the firing, and then he arrives at the settlement. 2. The passive voice, a bureaucrat's shield. When Kennedy asks why the government paid millions of dollars to people fired for political bias, Bondi retreats into the passive voice. A settlement was agreed to, she says. Kennedy stops. He writes. He knows that a settlement was agreed to is a sentence without a soul. It's a ghost decision. In the cinematic narrative, this is the moment the protagonist realizes the villain isn't a person, but a process. Who in the prior Department of Justice? Kennedy presses. Bondi deflects again, citing the Attorney General as a title, not a man. Kennedy translates the code for the record, Merrick Garland. By forcing the name into the room, he shatters the institutional fog. He replaces a division with a beating heart. 3. The laptop and the 51 spies. He moves the timeline forward to October 2020, the Hunter Biden laptop, the infamous letter signed by 51 intelligence officials labeling the story Russian disinformation. Kennedy establishes a devastating fact. The FBI had the laptop for 10 months before that letter was signed. They knew it wasn't Russian disinformation. Who at the FBI refused to let the FBI tell the American people the truth? Bondi's response? I don't have that name in front of me. Kennedy's retort is a statement of philosophical war. I like a name, not a division. A person with a brain and a beating heart. Creative analysis, the dehumanization of power. In this 30% analytical layer, we see the Netflix model of power. Modern governance relies on anonymity. If no one person makes a decision, no one person can be blamed. Responsibility is diffused across departments, committees, and ongoing reviews until it becomes a gas, impossible to grasp or hold accountable. Kennedy is attempting to rehumanize the institution. He is trying to pin the beating heart to the documented failure. The bridge to Epstein. By the time Kennedy returns to Jeffrey Epstein, he has successfully painted a picture of a Department of Justice that pays off biased agents and secret settlements, allows false narratives to persist before elections, hides the names of decision makers. The stage is set. If they did it for a laptop, if they did it for text messages, what wouldn't they do for the man who held the secrets of the world's elite? The transition is deliberate. The pattern is now a path. And that path leads directly back to a dark cell in Manhattan where the cameras were off and the guards were dreaming. In the previous chapters, Senator Kennedy established a pattern. Names are hidden, processes are automated, and accountability is a ghost. Now, he returns to the central mystery, the Epstein files, and challenges the very mechanism by which the government decides what we are allowed to see. When Pam Bondi states that the Department of Justice is working to release the records, but must ensure they don't put irrelevant information into public circulation, she is using a legal term of art as a tactical shield. 1. The power of the red pen. In a Netflix-style deconstruction, we must examine who defines relevance. In any other criminal case, a judge or an independent third party might decide what evidence is pertinent. But in the Epstein case, the investigating institution is also the gatekeeper of the evidence. The Department of Justice is essentially saying, we will show you what we think you need to know about our own failure. Kennedy's silence after this statement is deafening. He understands that Irrelevant is the most dangerous word in the English language when used by a federal agency. Is a flight manifest showing a sitting politician irrelevant? Is a gap in the surveillance footage irrelevant? Is the identity of the person who ordered Epstein off suicide watch irrelevant? 2. The victim shield. Bondi's second pillar of defense is protecting victims. This is the unstoppable force of legal arguments. No one, not even a senator, wants to be seen as the person who re-traumatized the survivors of Epstein's ring. However, Kennedy's strategy is to decouple the victims from the operators. He isn't asking for the names of the girls. He is asking for the names of the brains and beating hearts who allowed the system to fail. By blurring the two together, the DOJ creates a moral high ground that makes any inquiry look like an attack on the innocent. 3. Creative analysis, the economic incentive of secrecy. Why is the near future so profitable for the status quo? We must look at the economic and political valuation of information. Jeffrey Epstein did not just deal in human lives. He dealt in compromising material. If the full record were released today, the social capital of dozens of global power players would evaporate. Markets would react to the downfall of CEOs. Diplomatic relations would strain under the weight of exposed secrets. The near future is not a timeline. It is a stabilization period. It is the time required for the powerful to divest, to distance, and to disappear before the ink hits the public record. 4. The 73-year-old's weariness, Kennedy's line, like on Before I Die, is the emotional core of the documentary. It's the moment the audience realizes that this isn't just a political game, it's a race against mortality. Kennedy is 73. He has seen the 9/11's records take 20 years to unseal. He has seen the JFK files remain partially redacted 60 years later. He knows that the institutional near future is often longer than a human lifespan. The transition, the human element. Kennedy stops. He looks at Bondi. He has successfully exposed the process as a wall, but he has one more card to play. He is going to move from the files to the forensics. He is going to force the Attorney General to defend the physics of a death that defies the logic of the very room they are sitting in.